Public Integrity Bureau testifies that the department opened a third investigation into Officer Jeffrey Vappie just days after the first investigation into alleged payroll fraud. David Jones learned this and more during a federal court hearing and joins us now live with the latest.
Yeah, Meg, federal judge Susie Morgan ordered this rule to show cause hearing, which is now stretched into the third day as a way to bring all of the players involved in the NOPD's internal investigation into Officer Jeffrey Vappie to the table for her probe into how this investigation was handled. They're now on their fifth witness, Deputy Superintendent Nick Gernon, but the court spent much of the day with Deputy Superintendent Keith Sanchez on the stand. They spent around 6 hours questioning him. He's the head of the Public Integrity Bureau, or PIB, that's NOPD's Internal Affairs Unit. Vappie was one of the subjects of a series of Lee Zurich investigations outside the office that aired on Fox 8 through last year and into this year, and showed Vappie spending hours both on and off the clock with Mayor LaToya Cantrell inside a city-owned apartment. Our investigations also showed Vappie was appointed to the board of the Housing Authority of New Orleans, or HANO, by Mayor Cantrell. The monitor's concerns with the PIB investigation, which ultimately resulted in a letter of reprimand for Vappie and the officer being placed back onto duty with the mayor, revolves around what they say was an inadequate investigation into allegations of payroll fraud. Now, this initial investigation was actually split into two consecutive ones. Those initial two investigations started last year and concluded in March of this year. But on the stand today, Sanchez testified PIB, just days after those first two investigations were closed in March, opened a third investigation into Vappie tied to his time spent on the HANO board with payroll fraud alleged. That investigation is still open and will likely remain so, Sanchez testified, because the allegations were the same as what was alleged last year, and PIB is considering this investigation to be a duplicate. Now, Judge Morgan has raised concerns with the timeliness of PIB investigations and with the department's adherence to the 1635 rule, which basically states that officers can't work more than 16 hours and 35 minutes in a day. This hearing could make or break NOPD's compliance with the internal affairs section of the consent decree. The consent decree has governed reforms at NOPD toward constitutional policing for the better part of a decade, and the city has sought to remove itself from the consent decree, saying they're already a constitutional policing department. The mayor yesterday called this hearing a waste of taxpayer money. The hearing is still ongoing in federal court. We'll bring you the latest. For now, reporting live in federal court, David Jones, Fox 8, Local First.
All right, thanks, Dave.